Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the How to Help Hiring Managers Not Suck webinar. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded Wednesday, June 11th, 2014. I would now like to turn the presentation over to Erin Jacobson. Please go ahead.
Hello, and thank you all for joining today's webinar, How to Help Hiring Managers Not Suck. By the end of the day tomorrow, you will receive an email from ERE, which will include today's webinar slides, recording, and information containing HRCI credits. We have had an overwhelming response on today's topic, but before we get to it, I would like to say a quick thank you to JobVite for sponsoring today's webinar. I would like to introduce Claire from JobVite, who would like to take a few minutes of your time before we get started. Go ahead, Claire.
Thanks so much, Erin. I'm really excited to hear from John today and learn more about helping and engaging all of our hiring managers in the hiring process. So as you can see here, these are the 4 products that JobVite offers to help you along with the hiring process: refer, engage, hire, and our newest product, which is JobVite Video. And then just going quickly through to here is a big picture snapshot of some of our customers. We have a wide range of customers, some of whom I believe are on this call, so thank you very much to those of you. And with that, I'm just going to pass it back over to Erin.
Thank you so much, Claire. We're very lucky to have John Vlastelica speaking today. John will be taking questions throughout today's presentation and answering them at the end of the presentation. Please use the chat feature at any time by typing in your questions located at the bottom left corner of your screen. Welcome, John. I'm excited to turn this over to you now.
Great. Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Erin. So hey, guys, this is John Vlastelica here. You know what makes me crazy? Hiring managers that suck. Hiring managers that suck make me crazy. And when I think about all of the hiring managers that exist in the world, they kind of fall on a natural bell curve. There's some that are on the far right that are absolute superstars. There's some on the far left that just suck. And then there's those in the middle that are just okay, that have the potential to be great, but I think it's our job to help them be great. And so what I want to do today is talk about what many of the best hiring managers that I've seen in my travels do and keep this very actionable and specific. So we're not going to talk about a lot about why hiring managers are critical to the process. They're obviously critical. We're going to spend more time talking about kind of the how and some of the best practices. First, a little background on myself. I've spent 20 years in recruiting. I was a recruiting director with Amazon and Expedia here in Seattle, where the sun is out today. I'm very happy about that. Get to consult with some amazing companies, and as part of that, we look inside. We help with strategy, process, training. We do focus groups, and we've done focus groups now with over 1,000 hiring managers around the globe, and we certainly find that many of the best recruitment functions have many of the best hiring managers. So as part of that, we kind of study what do the best hiring managers do differently. One of the things before we get into kind of the what they do is I want to highlight that for every one of you as a recruiting professional, you really need to develop a point of view on this question, which is who owns recruitment? I think that there is no question that we have to be able to leverage hiring managers to make great hires, to hire great talent. You need a point of view on this. If you think of yourself as purely a supplier serving a customer, the hiring manager in this case, with a customer is always right orientation, you're probably not going to engage hiring managers very well. That was the orientation I took in the early part of my career, was that I was there to please my internal customer. I see hiring managers as owners in the process, and I'm a partner with them, not a customer service rep. I'm there to guide. I'm there to execute on a shared strategy. I'm there to help them be a wildly successful hiring manager, but I'm not there purely to be an order taker. So as a recruiter, as a recruiting leader, one of the things that you're going to want to be thinking about as we're talking is, how do I think about hiring managers? Because if you think of hiring managers as kind of purely a customer role, a lot of what I'm going to talk about, you're going to say, that's just not going to happen in my organization. They're not going to go for it. When I think about hiring managers and the difference they make, I think all the great hires in the world come from really engaged hiring managers. When we do work to help companies improve the quality of hire, half of what drives quality hire certainly comes from what the recruiter does or the recruiting team does. And there's all kinds of work we do around attracting great talent and branding and our strategies and our processes and the tools we use. But the other half comes from great hiring managers. And companies that have really high hiring bars, they have highly invested hiring managers without a doubt. There is no company on the planet that has a high hiring bar at scale that does not have highly engaged hiring managers. So what I want to do today is to share some best practices with you of hiring managers who don't suck. And I'm going to talk this fast. I talk fast. I'm going to pack a lot in, probably way too much for an hour. As Aaron mentioned, you're going to be able to download the slides, so I'll share a link and a password at the end of this. Our focus is really going to be on giving you actionable strategies you can take back to help your hiring managers play roles as attractors of talent, as sourcers, interviewers, closers, and then to help you scale this. How can they help be a leader and a mentor around this in your organization? But first, I want to talk a little bit about how you talk to your managers about their role in recruiting. One of the things that many of you are thinking is, John, I'm excited to hear this, but seriously, I got managers that suck at my company, and I want to know how am I going to get them engaged. I want to get them to want to step up and do more. I don't want to, punish them for not doing this well. I want them to want this. And so I'm going to share something now, and then I'm going to share something towards the end that will kind of give you an idea of how to talk to hiring managers around it. The first and the really positive opportunity has to do with how you frame it. A lot of managers think of recruiting as something they do outside of their day job, which sucks. So it's like they're doing us a favor when they respond to a resume or show up for an interview or give us interview, candidate feedback. I really want you to think about how you can reframe this and talk about hiring as a leadership opportunity, and use the word leadership because the language matters. I'm not going to read through all 10 of these items on here, but the core message for me is that the people you're going to hire are going to have a huge impact on your performance, your ability to get your work done, your team's work done, your reputation as a leader, and your career. Your ability to advance in this organization and other organizations has everything to do with how well you can build a team. This work is high impact. It's high visibility. We report on hiring success up through the CEO level. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of judgment, and it's something that leaders do really, really well. The message here is that this is an opportunity for you to lead. This is an opportunity for you to demonstrate a commitment to hiring great talent. It's your team is counting on you to staff the rest of the team with great people, and I'm here to help you do this well. I talked to an HR leader at a company that we were working with in 2008, and he was doing some work trying to calculate the cost of bad hires and such. And, I was thinking about this. It's a little formulaic, but I kind of like this thinking that, the average fully loaded salary for this guy, his salary is around $100,000 U.S. base. He said if you, kind of do fully loaded version, let's say $150,000, the average tenure at his company was about 3.5 years. So hiring decisions at his company were about $500,000 decisions. And I see hiring managers that will spend more time trying to decide, whether they should get the Samsung or the Sony, LCD TV for their living rooms. They'll spend more time researching that than they invest in recruiting in really what is a $500,000 decision or more. What I would do with this information, these talking points, where would you share this? I would try and get, as a recruiter or recruiting or HR leader, into orientation, into new manager training, and just spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about the role of the hiring manager. And then if you're an individual recruiter and you're having a conversation in your strategy, kickoff, intake, whatever you call that planning meeting when a new rec is opened, say this, and here's the words you use. Would you like to hear what the most successful hiring managers at our company do to hire the best talent up to 15 days faster than the average time to fill? Would you be interested in hearing what the best hiring managers do best? There are going to be some managers that are going to ignore this or say no, and they suck and they should be fired. I'm saying that with a big smile. And then there's going to be the managers that are going to be the rest of them, the middle ones in that bell curve, and certainly the ones on the far right that are actually setting the best practices up in your company. But the middle ones are going to say, of course I'd like to hear that. Why wouldn't they? And I want you to position it as a leadership opportunity, and I want you to share and focus it, frame it all around leading and helping them get the great talent they need to run their business. So we're going to talk about best practices. So that's a way to set it up and to get started. The best practices I want to talk about are really focused on those 5 areas. How do we help hiring managers attract great talent, source great talent, interview, close, and then play a leadership role? And I want to start off by talking about attraction. Hiring managers can and should be talent magnets in your organization. The stuff I'm going to share in the attraction section isn't rocket science, and I got to be honest, there's not a lot of hiring managers that do a lot more of than what I'm going to share with you. These are the best practices I see, and really a lot of it has to do with building a better presence online in the communities you want to recruit from. The best talent on the market, as you guys know, some of them will respond to our recruiter emails, but a lot of studies have shown that hiring managers engaging talent directly gets a much higher response rate. And many of the best talent, much of the best talent needs to be lured in by these savvy hiring managers. So this is your opportunity. And there's 4 things I want to talk about briefly. One is getting your managers to do more writing, more blogging. One of the things I see is some managers are posting their job postings, their job descriptions out on social networks. I think job postings and job descriptions largely suck. And so I think having managers simply post their jobs out, it's probably fine, but I doubt you're getting a big hit from that. What I'd rather encourage you to have them do, and what's easier for them to do, is to get them to write about the work. Really try and brand the work, the problems, the projects, the impact, how the work of this role is going to impact the company, how it's going to impact the industry, and depending on what you're doing, maybe even impact the world. That's really, really powerful stuff that will attract smart people, that will attract A-player talent. The other thing, of course, is to make their LinkedIn profiles not suck. And there's a lot of you can Google around for like pimping your LinkedIn profile. There's a lot of great stuff out there. Making sure that they've got recommendations, so encourage your hiring managers to solicit recommendations from their teams. One of my recruiter friends down in Silicon Valley said she ran a campaign recently, and she calculated 80% of the people that responded back to the campaign, this recruiting campaign, looked at her profile or the hiring manager's profile before responding. So candidates are looking at profiles. A lot of hiring managers think of LinkedIn as something you update when you're looking for a job. They don't realize how many candidates are looking at their LinkedIn profiles and what an unbelievable missed opportunity it is if we're not really pimping our rides and making our LinkedIn profiles better. So give them some content, help them, sit down with them, build a better LinkedIn profile. The other thing is working on PR, getting articles out there and guest posts. There's a great site out there called Help a Reporter Out. It's HARO.com, Help a Reporter Out. And this is a place where you can say, hey, I'm an expert in these areas. And when reporters need to write articles, they go to this site to identify speakers that can talk about things that are interesting. I just got interviewed for a Wall Street Journal article a few months ago, and just crazy how they found me. But find an opportunity to put yourself out there, get your managers out there, establish their expertise. When I worked at Amazon years ago, I sat down with our head of PR and marketing, and we talked about all the different events that were taking place in the technology space over the coming year, and I partnered with them to get our people as speakers, not career events, but technology events. And we identified who would be good speakers on what topics. We partnered on building slide decks that our hiring managers or our leaders could be using in these things. Of course, we incorporated a little bit of a recruiting message in there, but the big message wasn't Amazon is hiring. The big message is Amazon is working on some of the most complex, challenging, interesting technology problems on the planet, and that was really the big recruiting pitch. And then the last thing is to think about the career site. If your managers do blog, if you're open to this, it's kind of risky because managers may get bombarded a little bit, is to link to those blogs, link to their LinkedIn profiles, make it easier, not harder for leads to connect with them online. I have a client here in Seattle that did some work on a new career site, and it was good, but it wasn't what the head of product management wanted. The head of product management wanted something way more startup-y, way less corporate-y, and so he went off and built a niche site just for product managers, and he uploaded videos. He wrote his blog there. There were no job postings. He did live chat. There was some really interesting content on there, and it was part of his overall SEO, search engine optimization strategy, but it was also just a way for him to kind of create a bit of a brand around a job category that wasn't typically associated with this kind of company. These are some examples of some colleagues of mine that have some LinkedIn profiles that I think are good. Nimrod, who is an ex-Amazon guy I worked with years ago, who's no longer at Uyala, he's at Facebook now. You can see on this that he posted an update on LinkedIn that he was heading to a University of California career fair. You can see that there's, in the next section, this gray box, that there's lots of recommendations for this guy named Tom, and he's got actual job listings as one of his websites in addition to his blog on there. You can see some groups that another hiring manager I worked with belonged to. Getting your managers out there in groups is obviously a huge way to get their name out there for other people to recognize them. You can see some write-ups on the right-hand side. When people describe their work, they're not just saying, I'm the vice president of engineering and my team does X. There's a career message built into it. And you as recruiters can help your hiring managers write this content. A lot of it is talking about the challenging, interesting work that you're doing. It's not really a pure employer branding, PR approved kind of message. It's really more around branding the work. One of the things that I mentioned that I don't see a lot of companies doing this, but you might want to consider this, is when you think about your apply process, there's certainly the apply and go through our horrific HR black hole process that we all have. Or another option is to maybe suggest that people get introduced. So put your LinkedIn page out there, which is going to have all of their connections, and say we encourage you to reach out directly and get introduced into our company through someone that you know. I think this is a fantastic way for you to get managers a little more engaged. Some of you are going to have companies and cultures that would never do this, but if you can do this, it is a fantastic way to get your hiring managers out there a little more. You're not putting their email addresses necessarily. What you're really doing is you're putting the ability to kind of get introduced through LinkedIn. I want to talk about sourcing next. What can managers do around sourcing? We talked about attracting. How can they kind of get more involved? I'll tell you one of the things I had some good success with at a company I worked for. We had the CIO send out an email and a calendar invite to all of the new hires from the past month. I wrote the email, his assistant sent it out, and basically it said, come have pizza with the CIO. And so all these engineers got together in a room. We'd have about 10 to 15 folks that were hired that would attend this thing. Free pizza was the big draw, and then of course getting to spend time with the CIO, who was 3 or 4 levels kind of up from them. And what we would do is the CIO would basically draw a picture on the whiteboard of an org chart and talk about all the different kind of projects going on, draw a picture of the org chart, and then we'd go around and do introductions, and he would help the people in the room see how they fit into this model of what we're building. And he would also, as we're going on in the room, talk about where they worked, who they know, the kind of talent that we need, and he would basically solicit referrals during the meeting. And my recruiters would sit in this meeting, and we would capture names, and we would use this as a way to engage the business, engage the employees. We called it BYOR, bring your own referrals. But the idea was to get people engaged in helping to hire great talent. Now, when I was doing this years ago, LinkedIn was not as popular. We basically say, who do you know that's great? The great thing about tools like LinkedIn and others is we can change that language from who do you know that's great to here's who you know that's great. I know who you know. I could look up the employees that are coming to a meeting like this and look at if their LinkedIn is open. I can see who they're connected to, and I can get an idea of who I might want to ask for referrals from. The other thing on LinkedIn, of course, is just to make sure that people are very well connected. So make sure that your hiring managers are connected to all the current employees in your company now, their past coworkers, sign up any alumni or alumni groups. On the meetup side, there's incredible opportunities here to attend meetings, host meetings. I was a judge for the ERE Recruiting Excellence Awards the past few years, and one of the companies 2 years ago that won an award, they had more than 50% of their hires came through employee referrals, and it's because of events. They hosted events, so they allowed meetup groups to host at their small offices, or they went out and attended events. They did a fantastic job of getting out into the community, and they weren't handing out job postings. They were really, where possible, having opportunities for their business leaders, their sales leaders, their tech leaders, their finance leaders to stand up and talk about the work when they did introductions. And then the last one is coffee chats. This is very old school. I'm working with Target right now, and their head of technology does this on a regular basis. The recruiter that's working with him will identify opportunities, people that he should meet, not interviews, people they should meet, and they will say, hey, we'd like to set up coffee between you and our head of technology. Would you be interested? Groupon does this on a regular basis. It's driven by the recruiter, but it's a way to engage the hiring manager in talking to passive talent. It's a way to build some of those relationships. And some of those relationships take 6 months, 9 months, a year before they produce a hire, but they're a great way to get managers invested in talent communities. One of my clients actually gave hiring managers a $20 Starbucks card, which is a very small thing in the scheme of things, saying this is only for recruiting chats. This is only for kind of relationship chats where you're going out and buying coffee for someone. We are going to pay for it, and when you're done with this $20 one, come back and get another one. And they wanted to give people unlimited funds to have these kinds of conversations. The next thing is really around interviewing. Hiring managers spend a ton of time interviewing today, and the question is, how do we get them to be more engaged? How do we help them be great at interviewing? One of the things that great hiring managers need to do is they need to get their interviewing team all aligned on what it is we're looking for. I don't call this an HR meeting. I call this a project kickoff meeting. A lot of managers that we work with, they live and breathe the language of projects. And so if we have an opportunity to frame it as a kickoff meeting when you have a new position open up and highlight the very real pain of having a great candidate come in and having 5 interviewers not on the same page of what we're looking for, we get to the end and we either can't agree or we can't agree fast enough and we lose a good candidate. These meetings are unbelievably wonderful leadership opportunities for the hiring manager. You as the recruiter can co-lead this meeting, talk about the roles of the interviewers, talk about the goals, what we're trying to hire for, the process we're going to use, what the standards are, what good looks like, talk about the techniques, the interviewing techniques we're going to use, and talk about the decision process, including the trade-offs that we're going to make. Candidates are imperfect. Hiring managers, this is the opportunity for them to talk about trade-offs. You know, we will hire someone brilliant even if they're an ass. That may be your culture, or your culture may be the exact opposite. I don't care how brilliant they are. If they're an ass, we're not hiring them. And then defining the assness, defining what you mean by ass is really important. But having those kinds of conversations early on, great leadership opportunity and a great way for you to get people really, really well aligned. As you're sitting in on these meetings, you're going to be hearing things that didn't come up in your hiring manager kickoff strategy meeting when you first open the rec. And it's going to allow you to tweak things a little bit. It's going to allow you to potentially prep candidates better too for the kinds of experience they're going to have when they go through our process. The second thing is making sure that they're picking the right kind of people. A lot of organizations will pick the people to interview that are available. And of course, in an ideal world, we would have our best people interview every time. That's not always possible, but being conscious about who we're picking, really thinking about not just the kind of people we need to select the right talent, but the kind of people that the candidate is going to expect to meet or need to meet to be able to choose us as an employer. We want to make a fantastic hiring decision. We want to make sure we get buy-in from the right people, and we also want to make sure that we're selling. And certain people are great at interviewing and not great at selling, and some people are better at selling than interviewing. Make sure you have a great mix and a nice diverse mix. The other thing is really basic, you guys, I know, but it's still shocking to me how many companies are not assigning focus areas to interviewers. We've done focus groups with thousands of recent hires and candidates across companies, and what's really interesting, and I hear this over and over and over again, is A, players want to be interviewed. They want you to go deep. They want to be interviewed. So when you don't coordinate, when you don't have focus areas, in addition to you potentially ending up in a hiring decision situation where you can't make the call because you don't have enough information, the candidates are interviewing us as much as we're interviewing them, right? And so the candidates are wondering, did they go deep? Are they smart? Are they asking me questions that demonstrate these are people I can learn from? Assigning focus areas is a productivity and efficiency benefit to us, but just as importantly, it's a really big benefit back to the candidate as well. Candidates tell me regularly they could tell the different interviewers had focus areas, and they liked that. They liked the opportunity to go deep. The last thing is around decision making, and this is a little bit of what I talked about in the prep section, but really having hiring managers play a significant role, not in the prep area, but in the actual decision making process. This is the opportunity to keep and raise the bar, keep the bar high, raise the bar. There's a big opportunity for us in the decision making process to calibrate. This is where you learn who your good interviewers are. This is where you learn who goes on gut feel and who really goes after evidence. This is where you learn who's using using puzzle and type questions and who's actually using real good real-world case studies and getting really good evidence. We do a lot of hiring manager training, and one of the things we started adding in the last couple of years was teaching hiring managers how to actually facilitate tricky debriefs. So one of the things that's really good to do in your prep meeting is to identify what are the standards, what is our hiring philosophy, what are the trade-offs we're going to make, and then you as a recruiter helping to keep hiring managers accountable and not get that I got to get this butt in the seat orientation, but keep them accountable for maintaining a high bar. And if you do both the prep meeting on the front end and you do the debrief or decision meeting on the back end, you get to help them keep the bar high. I have this saying, reorgs happen. When hiring managers are hiring for the organization, they think about hiring for their short-term needs. The reality is that candidate who stays more than 2 or 3 years is likely not going to be working for that same hiring manager a year or two out. Reorgs happen. Things are going to be different. Our jobs as recruiters is to make sure that we're keeping the bar high and we're not letting managers get desperate and just hiring for their short-term needs. On a related note, kind of 3B, if you will, I want to talk about candidate experience. Our interviewing process is absolutely a selling process. Candidates we talk to are looking at who we put on the interview team, what questions we focus on, how we run the process, how much time we leave for them to ask questions, just how we treat them during the process. It's a preview of what they might be able to expect. One of the biggest things we can do to improve candidate experience, and this sounds kind of strange, is to screen more people out. One of the challenges I see with some companies, I was talking with a firm a couple weeks ago who is saying that they have about 8 or 9 candidates come on site for every one person they successfully hire, and that is really, really high. That means you've got a lot of interviewers interviewing all the time, and you're rejecting 8 out of 9 candidates. That's a lot of work. I would much rather you put better screening process up front and better definition of what you're really looking for, better calibration of interviewers. Spend that extra time up front so you have fewer candidates coming in. I think in an ideal world you should have a 3 or 4 to 1 interview to offer ratio. If your ratio is much worse than that, I think you have one of a couple things going on. 1, you're not sourcing great talent. 2, you're not all on the same page. Or 3, you are doing something in the process that's really turning off great candidates that causes them to kind of drop off. So spend more time screening people out so that you free up your time in your interviewing team to spend more time with fewer candidates when they come on site. It also gives you an opportunity to let hiring managers spend more time describing the job, answering questions, potentially doing something in the next category, which is kind of wowing them. I was working with Dolby a few years ago, and they were really focused on getting a candidate, and they put together this just amazing experience. The candidate was already had 2 offers from companies that we've heard of, and they kind of got to this candidate kind of late and ran the candidate through this incredible process. It was really fast. The team was really decisive. They knew what they were looking for. They knew they wanted to hire her, and they couriered the offer to her the next day. They sent a T-shirt, a Dolby T-shirt to her. They sent her a signed poster from everyone on the team. There were calls and emails from the team saying how much they enjoyed meeting them and hope they joined the team. There was a dinner invite to just kind of get the team and this candidate together, an executive called to do some Q&A. This candidate who was hired, who accepted the offer, was telling me this experience in a room with about 10 other candidates, and the other 10 people were looking at me like, why didn't I get all that? Like, that's pretty awesome. That was a really critical hire for Dolby. There's a lot of things we can do that don't require that much work, but find ways for us to get the managers engaged in creating a great candidate experience, and a lot of it is simple things like tours, doing product demos, letting people sit down and work side by side for maybe an hour or 2 with some of the people they'd work with. We do things like team lunches all the times. That's not a new thing, but that's a really nice thing that candidates comment to us on. Having times to meet the execs in a very casual way. If you know that an executive is going to be kind of in their office or close by, walking candidates around the workspace and doing some very informal introductions. Very, very cool. You want to give the executive a heads up on that, of course. And then there's lots of opportunities to do things like overview presentations or videos ahead of time where your hiring managers can record or prepare some content that we can send candidates before they come in. The other thing is around feedback, and one of the challenges that a lot of us have is that we are supporting remote hiring managers, or we're not really resourced to actually participate in the on-site interview, and we find ourselves not really totally aware of what's going on during the interview day until we debrief with the candidate. One of the things that we can do to help raise the bar on our interviewing process is to give hiring managers frank feedback about what the candidates have gone through during their process. So when you debrief with a candidate, if a candidate says, they had an amazing experience and you ask them to compare that experience to other places they've interviewed, absolutely give that feedback, that positive feedback to the manager to reinforce the good behavior. If they didn't have a great experience, if they were left waiting in the conference room, if they had interviewers that didn't seem like they were on the same page around what the job was, if there was no bio break, if you didn't let the candidate pee, that's a problem. Find those things that need to be fixed and be brave and confront the manager and share that feedback with the manager. Many of you guys are aware of sites like Glassdoor.com. Some of you may be aware of the Candidate Experience Awards, which is a great place to get some benchmarking data on what candidates expect from the interviewing and the kind of recruiting process. Take that information and share that. If you have a candidate that has a really bad experience and you find out about it, pull the interviewing team back together and do a postmortem on it. Talk about the one that got away, the candidate that dropped out. Big opportunity for us to kind of keep that feedback cycle. And then the other thing is just to get hiring managers more involved in leading, to identify the ideal candidate experience. Here's an exercise you can take back and use. We do this as part of our interview training all the time. Stand up in front of a group at a staff meeting or at a lunch and learn or some opportunity where you've got about 15 minutes in front of the interviewing teams you work with and say, imagine you referred a candidate. They came in and interviewed yesterday. This is someone you would vouch for. They interviewed yesterday. You call them up today and you say, hey, John, how'd it go? What did you think of interviewing at our company? What do you hope comes out of their mouth? And what I want you to do is I want you to ask them, what would they have said in an ideal world? What would they have said about what they learned about the job? What would they have said about the people they met, the culture, the process itself, the speed? Kind of prompt them. Don't tell them what to say, but give them ideas of the kinds of things you want feedback on, and capture that on a whiteboard, on a flip chart piece of paper. And once you get that list going, and it's amazing how good hiring managers are at talking about this ideal state. Once you get that list going, then pause and begin to reverse engineer and ask the question, if we wanted every candidate to say these great things, how would we build a process that makes sure we deliver that kind of candidate experience? And because you use their words and because you kind of engage them in the process, they will not only have better visibility into it, they'll think about their process through the lens of a candidate, but they'll have more ownership about the idea because it'll be their ideas. This is where I've helped companies go through from 8 interviewers on an interview team, get it down to 4. This is where we've helped companies that have really just kind of death by coding. Go to the whiteboard and write code, or take MBA students and ask them these crazy puzzle questions, and really swap those out for things that are more job related, that are more interesting to A-player candidates. There's lots and lots of cool things. I have a whole list of things that kind of cool companies have done to create great candidate experiences. After this webinar, I would love for you to email me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and share some things you guys are doing. I love to hear about this stuff. I want to talk about closing and selling. This is often a really, really fun area for to get involved. And so I think that a lot of hiring managers like this part. Let's talk about what the best hiring managers do best in this space. One of the things that I think about this kind of the 4 Ps when I think about hiring managers that are really good at this. The first one is that they're really clear about the kind of candidate who's going to be naturally motivated to do this work and take this job. I have some clients who, frankly, don't pay well enough, but they aren't located in the right geographies. They're not doing very interesting work, and they say they want to get candidates out of these big, giant global brands, and they're trying to figure out what the right pitch is to get this kind of talent. And the challenge is you're going to get some of that talent, but you're not going to get the bulk of your talent's not going to come from those places. You're just not going to be competitive with some of those places. So we got to think about who can we get, who can we afford. Let's make sure we have hiring managers shopping in neighborhoods they can afford, and then let's talk about what is the right kind of pitch. How do we attract someone like that to our organization? I was working with a hiring leader actually at a ERE presentation I did 2 years ago down in San Diego, and I had a couple hiring leaders up on the stage, and one of them was from Yahoo, and he spent a significant amount of time as a vice president, working with his directors and managers, getting really clear on the kind of candidate who would be great for Yahoo in 2013. Not the kind of candidate who's just great in general, but what kind of person do we need to bring into our organization, given all the change that's going on. We've got a new CEO. This is our 4th or 5th CEO in 6 years. We've got these really cool big opportunities. We've got these business priorities. We've got a certain kind of reputation thing that helps us or hurts us in this area. He really partnered well with his heads of talent acquisition to really identify what is the profile of the person that's going to love it here, and then how do we make sure we're speaking to those people, which is the second piece, the pitch. How do we develop a sales pitch that speaks to those motivators? I'm going to give you guys 3 questions you can ask. If you can get top performers in a room, so think about your best salespeople, your best finance people, your best ops people, your best customer care, engineering, whatever they are, get them in a room and ask them these 3 questions, okay? Ask them these 3 questions. What brought you here? What keeps you here? And what would lure you away? If you want to find out the motivators of the top talent in your company, ask them what brought them, what keeps them, what would lure them away, and you'll begin to identify in very real world terms with real stories and real examples what you need to do when you're crafting your pitch. This is what we do when we help companies with kind of EVP, employee value prop stuff and branding stuff. It's really getting at the heart of why someone great would want to work at your company. What I hear most often, to be honest, are some of the things I have in the second bullet there. Work on challenging projects, make a big impact, learning, having freedom. I would encourage you to identify what those are for your company and then build your pitch in partnership with the hiring managers and then create some one-pagers, maybe even create a 20-minute lunch and learn around how to pitch people. The third thing, of course, all of us as recruiters know this, we have to not just do a general pitch. You don't just do a peanut butter approach. You want to personalize it. You want to identify what are this specific candidate's motivators. How do we make sure we're addressing what it is that's important to them? How do we help them picture themselves working here? How do we address their career problems? When we've talked to candidates about motivators, we hear things like challenge, impact, learning, those things. And then we talk to individual people about their situations. You know, for some people it's boredom. It's I'm not learning. I'm not making a difference. My boss sucks. I don't feel like I'm rewarded properly. Teach managers about the 5 or 6 big things that are most common with the kind of candidates you go after. Capture those and talk about how we speak to those. So if boredom is a common thing, you know, your natural response might be to talk about some of the interesting projects, the variety of projects, the variety of geographies, the variety of products, you know, all the things that make it not boring at your company, and teach managers how to have a good comeback to those kinds of things. The question, one of many questions I will use with a candidate to identify kind of what's important to them, what's their career problem, if you will, I ask them this question. What do you hope would be the same if you joined our company? What do you hope would be different if you joined our company? So what do you hope would be the same or different with this opportunity versus what you're doing now? That's a good way to ask candidates question. It's a good question to ask to really uncover why are they interested in making a move. You can ask them why do they want to make a move, and they'll say, you know, some generic BS thing like, you know, better opportunity or you know, maybe it's something about relocation or their commute. But if you ask what do you hope would be the same, what do you hope would be different, early in the conversation you can begin to kind of identify what is that criteria. And I ask hiring managers to ask them that. You know, a lot of hiring managers will know the companies that these candidates are coming out of. You know, so if you work at Microsoft and you're a startup trying to hire someone out of Microsoft, you might say, wow, you know, you've worked at Microsoft for 5 years. Why would you want to leave Microsoft and come here? What do you hope would be the same? What do you hope would be different if you came here? And you're listening for things that tell you that this person's going to be a good fit and frankly, that they're going to find what they're looking for. I have some clients that will tell me, you know, if we have someone who is considering an offer from a big company while they're talking to us, the small company, that's probably not a good fit for us because the fact that they would even consider going to a super huge company tells us things about this candidate. I'm not sure that's fair and that's always accurate, but I think it is one sign. It's one signal that I would want to look at. So asking them about what they hope would be the same or different is a good way to get at that. And then the last thing, of course, is getting managers involved in the actual closing and partnering. You can engage managers. It's a big ego boost. I used to love to get our VPs and our executives, sometimes even our CEO involved in closing really, really key candidates and having them kind of play that role, calling them the closer, kind of joking with them about it, giving them a little bit of a 3 or 4 bullets about the person's background, what their concerns are, really kind of coaching them on what you want them to speak to. It's a really, really fun bonding moment moment for you as a recruiter and maybe an executive you don't get to work with very often to sit side by side. I've sat in on the phone calls. I've sat in the room when they've done it. It's just a really fun way. I learn how they pitch. I get to give them some feedback occasionally, and we get to get some wins. We get to kind of get a little high five moment with some of these executives. The last thing I want to talk about in these kind of 5 is leading, mentoring, and partnering. There are managers that do more than just kind of find candidates for their jobs, that interview really well. They really are the people that help us create a culture of recruiting in our companies. And when I think about kind of the secret sauce to great recruiting, it's engaged hiring managers, but on an even bigger level, it's having a culture of recruiting in your organization where everyone feels like a recruiter. So how do these hiring managers help us scale these best practices across the org? How can we engage them and get them to help create other great hiring managers? One of the ways we do this is to have them help us with training. This is something that I love to do. I love to identify some of my superstar hiring managers, the ones that are really well respected, the ones that have a high hiring bar, and have them help co-lead our interview training. So I imagine 80-90% of you on the phone right now have interview training you do. If you can get hiring managers to co-deliver it and give them some of the fun stuff to talk about, don't just like divvy up the slides 50-50, but give them a cool exercise. Give them an opportunity to talk about our hiring philosophy. Give them a chance to tell stories about the candidate who looked good on paper who ended up sucking in the interview process, or the candidate who didn't look good on paper but ended up being a rock star through the process. Give them opportunities to tell stories. Stories builds culture, and give them an opportunity to tell great recruiting stories. I've been working lately with companies, in addition to interview training, on creating a workshop that's something like how to be a successful hiring manager at company X. And so one of the things you might want to think about, whether it's a lunch and learn or brown bag thing, or whether it's just you commandeering 30 minutes of a staff meeting for some of the businesses you support, is to go in and talk about the characteristics of the most successful hiring managers, the best practices in your company, and a lot of these things I'm sharing you should be able to copy paste and leverage. But what are the best practices in your company? And talk about this at new hire orientation. Talk about this at new manager orientation. Get this kind of hiring managers are the secret sauce to great talent and great results. Get that message out there and give specific examples of what great hiring managers do. The second thing is around mentoring. So getting hiring managers paired up with other interviewers in particular, pairing up a lot of us work in companies where we have sales and engineering talent that gets promoted in their first job and as managers. Great opportunity for you to find senior managers and director level people who will be willing to be mentors. So when they have a new position to open up, they partner with you in recruiting. It also is a bit of an ego boost if you attach some kind of recognition to it, to ask some of these senior managers and directors and say, hey, Neil, you are such a phenomenal recruiter in this company. You are such a phenomenal hiring manager. You exemplify the qualities we want all of our hiring managers to have. Would you be willing to share and play a leadership role and some mentoring with some more junior hiring managers that are just kind of learning the ropes? Would you be willing to maybe shadow them in a couple of their interviews? Would you be willing to sit with them when we do some resume reviews? Would you be willing to maybe participate with them the first time they go out on campus to do a presentation, or the first time they do a meetup? Would you be willing to help them think through some challenging hiring decisions? It is a fantastic way to get your junior people exposed to some really senior level talent. It's also a great way to get these senior people kind of engaged in recruiting. Google has a rule of 4. Google has this rule that says there shouldn't be more than 4 interviewers. They did some kind of study to figure out that 4 was the point at which you get the optimum amount of feedback to make a quality hiring decision. If you have 5, the law of diminishing returns kicks in. You don't get a better decision, and it just costs you an extra resource. We did something like this at Amazon. We found that the optimal number was 5. But whatever the number is for you, think about adding 1 extra person on that interview team that is paired up with someone that's really good. So Google has kind of this rule of 4, but then they really have this kind of rule of 5 now. I was just in Amsterdam with Mary Hammershock, who's the head of global tech recruiting, and she was talking about how they explicitly do this as a way to scale up their interviewing team. So as you're thinking about building out your interviews, identify people that are smart, that are high potential, that have maybe gone through your interview training, and find opportunities for them to sit in on interviews and become a good interviewer. The other thing is building advisory groups. one of my secret weapons when I was a corporate recruiting leader was to have groups of people that I could count on that were very honest with me, sometimes brutally honest, and I would get them involved in projects we would do. So when we were building out our target candidate profiles, when we were building out our target schools we were going to approach on the university side, when we were talking about employer referral campaigns, when we're building out our campus recruiting slide decks or our event strategy, or when I would share the PR calendar and talk about all the different places we wanted to go and ask them for feedback on who do you nominate to be a speaker at this. This was my secret weapon, was having this group of people that was available to me, that was engaged in recruiting. We gave them names. We called this a group. I would buy them food. I would do everything I could in my power to elevate their contributions, not just to recruiting but to the company. When we had big wins, I would always call out and give these folks recognition for playing such a critical role. So if you can, identify some hiring managers that are friendly, going back to the bell curve, the ones that are on the far right that are really great, identify ones that are really great and see if you can engage with them and just create a little project team around something interesting you're working on. If they build it, they will help own it. If they build it, they will critique it before you quote-unquote roll it out and get all this nasty feedback. They will give you that feedback before you roll it out. They will help you think about things you didn't think about, which will help you drive better engagement. And then the last thing is rewards. I'll tell you guys a quick story. I was working at a company. We had performance reviews coming up in a few weeks, and I was thinking about all of the amazing people that had done this great work as hiring managers for the company. Some of them were not hiring managers. They were just interviewers or regular employees, engineers, salespeople, ops people, whatever. And so I ran a report, and I said, I want to see a report of everyone that's made a successful employer referral hire this year. So the referrers, I want the names of those people. I want to see everyone that's done a campus presentation this year. I want to see everyone that has been an interviewer that is part of our kind of small group of interviewers for these key jobs. I pulled this list together, and it was about 40 or 50 people. I took one of these names, this guy Jeremy, and I sent a note to Jeremy, and I sent a note to his boss, and I included them both in the to line, and it said, thank you, Jeremy, for your contributions to raising the bar and delivering great talent for the company. And in the body of the email, I said, hey, Jeremy's boss, I don't know if you know this or not, but Jeremy has been a phenomenal recruiting star this year. He's done, he's made 6 referrals, 4 of which got hired into your teams. He's been on 3 campus presentations. He gets very high ratings from students. He has been my go-to guy when we've had people fall out of interviews. He's always willing to step in. He's just a total stud when it comes to recruiting, and I just wanted to recognize his great achievement. Jeremy, thank you so much. We hire great talent because of contributions of people like you. Thank you kind of thing. So I send this 2 weeks before performance reviews. Guess where that information went? Right? It went right into Jeremy's performance review. And so a few weeks pass. I'm sitting at my desk. I get a knock at my door. I turn around. It's Jeremy. And it's like, hey, Jeremy, how you doing? He's like, great. And I said, oh, okay. What's going on? He goes, yeah, I want to say thanks a lot. And I'm like, thanks a lot? What do you mean thanks a lot? He said, thanks a lot for writing all that stuff to my boss. And I'm like, you're sounding kind of sarcastic. What do you mean thanks a lot? He said, well, thanks to you, my boss took that information and put it in my review. And I'm like, I know. You're a stud. Like, that was my goal, was to get that into your review. I think it's awesome. You deserve the recognition. He goes, no, thanks to you, I have goals for next year now. My boss took all that stuff that I did and said, you did 6 referrals, let's shoot for 8. You did 3 campus presentations, let's shoot for 5. He goes, thanks to you, I'm doing your frickin' job. And of course, I am smiling the biggest smile, and I am like, holding my hands above my head, just smiling and laughing, because I'm like, oh my God, I just got recruiting goals into a hiring manager's performance review. Like, wouldn't that be awesome, you guys, if we all had our hiring managers had goals around recruiting? That's not going to happen every time, but I'll tell you, that cost me 0. It cost me nothing. It took me 4 hours, 5 hours to pull together this list. It took me a few hours, really minutes per person, to send a little thank you email. I kind of templated it, send it out. It went into a lot of people's performance reviews. I would encourage you to do that. It's one of the ways that we can lead as recruiters, is to recognize leaders, recognize other people for performance, and getting that kind of acknowledgement is a really, really, it's like the fridge magnet, right? It's a nice way to acknowledge more publicly or more formally all the great work that some of your superstars do. The other thing I'll tell you real quick on this is, please, 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 I want you guys to promise me this week, think of the 3 best hiring managers you've ever worked with in your career. Go out and write LinkedIn recommendations for them. We as recruiters need to do a lot more of this. It's one of the ways that we're going to elevate the role of the hiring managers just in general is to pick up on that Jeremy guy that you work with, write a 3 or 4 sentence review that just highlights all the great work he does. Don't talk about his technical contribution or his business results as much. Just purely talk about him as a talent leader, talk about him as a great hiring manager with a high bar, who partners really well with recruiting, who will dive in and make things happen. Talk about that. I guarantee you they will put that on their LinkedIn profiles. And it's another way that when candidates are checking out your company and looking at who potentially they're going to work with, it's another way that you can highlight that we've got some great people here, that this is a great place to work. I've got a whole list of things that goes beyond this screen of cool things that hiring managers have done. A lot of what I've talked about has been good best practice stuff. It's general stuff. It's frankly, what great hiring managers do. There's other things that people do that go above and beyond that are kind of fun to talk about. I had a hiring manager who set up a free Wi-Fi. He set up a free Wi-Fi signal in this core part of downtown where a lot of other tech companies were located, and he called the Wi-Fi password jobs at his company, and he put his Twitter handle on there. And just made Wi-Fi available for free in this area. We had a company we were working with that did ride-alongs for salespeople, where they got to actually go out and experience kind of working in this role a little bit, get a real-world preview of it, and bond with salespeople. We had a retail client who wanted to get in kind of an aggressive sales-oriented culture, wanted to get their candidates into a position where they got to see some of that kind of aggressiveness and that drive, and so they did scavenger hunts. And they would have people, believe it or not, they would have 5, 6, 7 candidates show up at the mall before the mall opened, and they would have to do scavenger hunts and break into teams and do some things. And it's a very interesting approach, but I really liked what was behind it. A hiring leader in the retail space said, I really want to get an opportunity to see some of these young people kind of work in teams. I want to see them. I want to see how familiar they are with the brands that we sell. It was just a cool idea. Zynga, the gaming company, had an open house, and one of their leaders stood up, and it was a pretty packed room. They had food and stuff, and they invited a bunch of people from the community. He was walking around showing off offices and asking people that he wanted to recruit to pick out their office, and they were in some really cool office space. It was a really neat idea. One of the companies I worked for, we built icons, little recognition badges that we put on the intranet. If you were someone who was a great interviewer, if you made employee referrals, you got a little tiny icon. This is before the term gamification was out there, but you got a little icon that highlighted your contribution. A lot of companies I work with have referral competitions between teams, big opportunities to do some engagement before the candidates come on board. Groupon did something really cool. Their head of editorial, the people that write all the funny little Groupon ads that we get in our inboxes, they would actually invite people in that are candidates and run them through an editorial class to basically teach them how to write in the Groupon voice. And they got a chance to work side by side with candidates. They got a chance to work side by side with the people they'd be working with, see the tools they had. They basically got trained on how to do this and then were given some assignments. They got paid for this, so it was a paid thing, but it was a great way, a very innovative way to kind of test people, because looking at how they wrote for their other company, may not have had the Groupon voice. So the question was, could they pick up the Groupon voice? We had hiring managers who set up alumni groups. One hiring manager set up an alumni group for a competitor he wanted to recruit out of. He used to work at this company. He said, I'm going to set up the group, and I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm a group owner. There's lots of tools out there now. I saw JobBite mention they're doing some video space. There's a lot of opportunities for managers to record videos about the job, about the team, about themselves. How awesome would that be to send a note to the candidate with a personalized little 1-minute, 2-minute video from the hiring manager using their Android or iPhone, just talking about the role a little bit. And then Yahoo does some really cool stuff. They have things called sprints, and they actually pull teams in, hiring managers that have really critical openings that need a lot of sourcing muscle around, and they get people in a room for 4 hours, 8 hours, sometimes several days, and they do these big sourcing jam sessions. Microsoft does something similar as well. They call them sprints, and they're just an opportunity to reach out to your network in real time and work side by side with recruiters to kind of get the word out and then deal with all the incoming kind of stuff. So lots of cool stuff that people are doing. I would love if you want to send me an email to hear about some of the things that you're doing as well. one of the things I would encourage you to do, I've done this with every company I've worked with, get your team in the room, get your team of recruiters in the room. This is the suggestion on the left-hand side, and define what your most successful hiring managers do differently. And then use that list as a standard when you're in new hire orientation, when you're in new manager orientation. This is the bar you set. So set the bar high for expectations for your hiring managers. It's a good place to start. It's a critical place to start. Talk about what your successful hiring managers do. One of the ways that I typically do this is we talk about our hiring managers that suck the most, and we talk about how they think about recruiting, how they engage or not engage, how they respond or not respond, and then we kind of reverse engineer into the positive aspect of what the best do best. But come up with a list, and you can borrow my list here as a start if you want, but I imagine your list would look fairly similar. Come up with a list of these things, and then take that list of those positive attributes you want to reinforce and arm your recruiters with that, so that when you have a new hiring manager that you've not worked with before and you talk about process, you can talk about the best practices of the hiring managers in your company. Really, really important that we set the bar on this. Now, 72.5% of you are on this call still, and you're saying, John, love this stuff. My hiring managers suck. I still don't get how I'm going to engage them around this. You talked about setting the bar high and having the conversation and orientation, and I get that. But seriously, how do I get these people involved? And I'm going to tell you that it's not a secret, but the challenge for us is that if your hiring managers are not experiencing pain around hiring, they're probably not going to step up and lead. So if your hiring managers are not feeling pain, if from their perspective having jobs open 150 days is not a problem, if from their perspective talking to 8, 9, 12 candidates for on-site interviews and not making an offer is not a problem, if they're okay hiring very average talent, if they're okay losing good people, I can't imagine they would be, but if they were, if they're just not motivated around this, you're going to have a really hard time engaging them. The key to me is framing. You want to, when you're trying to motivate a manager to step up, you want to frame everything you talk about, everything you want them to do, you want to frame around hiring pain, not compliance. We're not doing this because you have to do it. It's part of the process. Costs are rarely a motivator. Managers do not care about source of hire. They really don't care about referrals versus agencies versus people that applied online, and they don't care just about emotional pleas. You've got to frame it around pain. And so everything you talk about needs to be framed with, this is going to help you get quality talent faster. If you're delivering quality talent faster and that resonates with them, you're going to get them to step up. If you're not, then you're just talking about stuff they don't care about. They've got to have pain to be motivated. There's no motivation to change if they're not feeling the pain. Sometimes we have to expose the pain. Sometimes that looks like publishing some metrics and sharing those publicly. Sometimes that's disengaging from the hiring manager and not re-engaging until they're ready to engage with us. But that's a topic for a whole other webinar. But bottom line is that to get people to engage, you've got to focus in on the pain. I was studying recruiter performance at a company. I was looking at recruiters and what the high performers did differently than the others, and we were looking at two recruiters that had the same rec load. They had the same type of jobs they recruited for, so they're in the same department. They were sitting side by side. One of the recruiters had these amazingly engaged hiring managers. They had big aggressive goals in their business unit. They needed to ramp up. They needed to get like 40 hires by the end of the year. The other recruiter, looking for the same kind of talent, had really passive hiring managers. It was like pulling teeth to get them to respond. The first recruiter was literally 2 times as productive, not because they had access to better tools, not because I even think they were a better recruiter in a pure recruiting sense. They were sourcing just as good as the other one. But these engaged hiring managers pulled candidates through the process. The hiring managers had hunger for great talent. They were hungry. And so to me, hiring managers are the secret sauce to getting quality and speed. Hiring managers are the secret sauce to a scalable recruiting function. So with that, I covered a lot of ground. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff: attracting, sourcing, interviewing, closing, leading. I talked very fast. Here's what I'd recommend you do next. Define those successful hiring manager characteristics. So get in a room with your recruiters, talk about what the best hiring managers do differently, and then prioritize. Where can we best leverage them? Is it around sourcing? Is it around our hiring bar is too low? We need to get them involved in interviewing. Are we losing people? We need to close them. And then test some of these ideas with friendly hiring managers. Before you kind of change up everything and go out and do some kind of launch, in HR we love to launch things, find some friendly hiring managers and start to get their feedback on it. And then when they start to see good results, build that cause-effect kind of pathway in their brain and say, hey, because you invested time in this, you got this great candidate. We would have lost that candidate 3 months ago, but you are the difference maker. And then, of course, leverage the hell out of them. And where you can, reward them, motivate them, partner with them, elevate them in the organization so that everyone sees them as a leader. I covered a bunch of stuff. I went fast. I totally get that. I didn't want to cut anything out. It's like my baby. I didn't know what to cut. But you can read through all of this. As you can see, I put a lot of detail on the slides. Here's the download link. Aaron's going to send the download link out to everybody. The password is just ERE 2014. If you can download it by next Friday, that would be great. I would love to connect with you guys. If you have ideas, I'd love to hear from them. Webinars are kind of hard because I can't really interact very well. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some good stuff out of it. And Aaron, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, John. I know we had a ton of questions that came in, but we are at the top of the hour, so hopefully John can connect with you on those questions. And just a quick reminder that by the end of the day tomorrow, you'll see an email from ERE that will include today's webinar slides, a link to the recording, information containing HRCI credits. A big thanks to John Vlastelica for sharing with our audience today. Another huge thank you to JobBite for sponsoring today's webinar. Don't forget to check out JobBite services. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the webinar for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines.